My name is Maya, and I'm 28 years old. The day my father found me limping home with my baby on my hip and no car in sight, he asked me a simple question that changed everything. Why didn't you drive? I never thought 3 words could unravel a year of carefully hidden control, or that my answer would lead to the hardest fight in my life. What happened next exposed truths I'd been too afraid to see, and forced me to choose between the family I'd built and the freedom I'd lost. If you're watching this video right now, I'd love to know where you're from. Drop it in the comment section below, hit that like button, and subscribe to hear more stories about standing up when everything tells you to stay silent. The grocery bags cut into my palms as I shifted Eli higher on my hip. Every step sent a sharp pain through my twisted ankle, but I kept moving. I had to. The stroller wheel had bent 3 blocks back, leaving me no choice but to carry everything: my 18-month-old son, 2 bags of groceries, and the weight of a life I was too exhausted to examine anymore. The afternoon sun beat down on the cracked sidewalk as I limped past Mrs. Chen's house, past the corner where the stop sign leaned slightly to the left, past all the familiar landmarks of a neighborhood that had stopped feeling like home months ago. Eli's little fingers tangled in my hair, tugging occasionally, his weight making my shoulder ache. I'd called Adam 4 times. 4 times, and every call went to voicemail. I should have been used to it by now. As I stepped off the curb at Maple Street, I heard my name called in a voice that made my throat tighten immediately. Maya? I turned to see my father's pickup truck pulling alongside me, his weathered face filled with concern behind the wheel. Harold Bennett, retired firefighter, the man who'd taught me to ride a bike and change a tire, the man I hadn't seen in 2 weeks because visits had somehow become complicated, inconvenient, always postponed. He pulled over immediately, his door opening before the engine even stopped. Dad, I said, trying to sound casual, normal, fine. Hey, what are you doing in this neighborhood? But his eyes were already scanning me, the limp, the bags, the baby, the exhaustion I couldn't hide anymore. Those eyes that had assessed burning buildings for 30 years, that could spot structural weakness from across the street, those eyes saw everything I'd been trying to conceal. Why are you walking? His voice was gentle but firm, the tone that meant he already knew something was wrong. Where's your car? Where's the SUV I bought you? The question hit me like a physical blow. The SUV. The one gift my father had insisted on when Eli was born, the one piece of independence I'd thought was truly mine. My hands trembled slightly as I adjusted Eli's position. It's at the house, I stammered, looking away. Why isn't it here with you? He stepped closer, his shadow providing relief from the sun. Why are you limping with groceries and a baby in this heat? I opened my mouth to give him the rehearsed answer, the one Judith had prepared me to say if anyone asked. She's borrowing it. I don't mind. I prefer walking for the exercise. But when I looked into my father's eyes, something inside me cracked. Judith took the car, I whispered, and suddenly tears were streaming down my face, tears I didn't mean to shed, tears I'd been holding back for months. She said it's better if I stay home and focus on being a mother. She said I'm lucky they let me stay in their house and that I needed to learn responsibility. The words tumbled out in a rush, and I immediately regretted them. Please don't make this a big thing, Dad. It's fine. It's just temporary until... But I stopped because my father's entire posture had changed. The gentle concern had transformed into something else, something I'd only seen a handful of times in my life. His jaw clenched, his shoulders squared, and his eyes became sharp and focused in a way that reminded me he'd run into collapsing buildings when everyone else ran out. Get in the car, Maya, he said quietly, dangerously calm. We're fixing this tonight. My stomach dropped. No. You don't understand. Adam gets really upset when... I don't care what Adam gets. He opened the passenger door and gently took the grocery bags from my aching hands. Get in the car. I hesitated, frozen between the fear of confrontation and the overwhelming relief of someone finally taking my side. In my arms, Eli began to fuss, sensing my tension the way he always did. My father's expression softened immediately. He reached out carefully. Can Papa hold you, buddy? Eli practically lunged toward him, wrapping his little arms around Harold's neck with enthusiasm I hadn't seen in weeks. My son relaxed completely in my father's arms, resting his head on Harold's shoulder like he'd found the safest place in the world. And that's when it hit me. That small moment. My baby felt safer with my father than he did in his own home. The realization made my knees weak. I climbed into the truck. As Dad secured Eli in the old car seat he kept in the back, the one from emergency babysitting visits that had become increasingly rare, I felt something shift inside me. The air conditioning hit my face, and I realized I was shaking. "How long has this been going on?" Dad asked as he pulled into traffic, his voice carefully controlled. "A few months," I admitted quietly. "It started small. Judith said she noticed I was getting anxious while driving, that maybe I should let her drive when we all went out together. Then she suggested she hold onto the spare key, so I wouldn't lose it. Then she started saying I seemed tired and maybe shouldn't drive until I felt better. And then last week, she just took both sets of keys." "And Adam?" I swallowed hard. "He said his mom was just trying to help, that I was overreacting, that my hormones were probably still adjusting from having Eli, and I was seeing problems where there weren't any." Dad's hands tightened on the steering wheel, his knuckles going white. "What else?" he asked quietly. That's when everything came pouring out. Things I'd never said aloud. How Judith checked my phone whenever I left it on the counter, claiming she was just making sure I wasn't getting overwhelmed by social media. How Adam had installed a location tracker on my phone for safety. How they made comments constantly about my father's influence, making me weak and ungrateful. How maybe I spent too much time thinking about what my mother would have wanted instead of appreciating what I had now. Dad pulled over abruptly, parking in a grocery store lot. He turned to face me fully. "Controls start small, Maya," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "They take a little at a time so you don't notice. Then they take everything, and you're left wondering how you got there." He paused, his eyes searching mine. "You think I didn't see this coming? I saw it at your wedding. I saw it when the visits started getting canceled. I saw it every time Adam found a reason you couldn't come to Sunday dinner." I stared at him, stunned. "You knew?" I suspected. I hoped I was wrong. His voice broke slightly. "But a father knows when his daughter is disappearing." Tears streamed down my face again, but this time they felt different. Not ashamed, not hidden, just honest. "I don't know how to get out," I whispered. Dad reached over and took my hand, his calloused palm warm and solid and real. "You already started," he said firmly. "Today.
Right now.
And you're not doing it alone." He started the engine again. "You're staying with me tonight." Panic flared in my chest. "Dad, Adam will be furious. He'll say I'm being dramatic, that I'm causing problems, that." "Then let him come talk to me," Dad said calmly, pulling back onto the road. "Let him try." The 20-minute drive to the house I shared with Adam and Judith felt like the longest journey of my life. My father's calm presence beside me should have been reassuring, but all I could think about was the confrontation waiting inside those walls. The house looked peaceful from the outside. Neat lawn, flower beds Judith obsessively maintained, the porch swing I'd picked out thinking it would be a place to rock Eli on summer evenings. I'd never sat on it once. Judith said babies shouldn't be outside in the evening air. Dad pulled into the driveway and cut the engine. In the rearview mirror, I could see Eli sleeping in his car seat, exhausted from the afternoon's chaos. Part of me wanted to tell Dad to just drive away, to forget the car, to let them keep everything if it meant avoiding what was about to happen. But before I could speak, the front door opened. Judith appeared on the porch, her arms crossed, her expression already twisted with disapproval. She was dressed impeccably as always, pressed slacks, a crisp blouse, her silver hair styled perfectly. She looked like a woman who had never limped home with groceries and a baby on a twisted ankle. "Is this the dramatic entrance we're doing now?" she called out, her voice dripping with condescension. Dad stepped out of the truck slowly, deliberately. I'd seen him move like this before, at accident scenes, approaching volatile situations with measured calm. He walked around to my side and opened my door, waiting for me to get out at my own pace. "Where's my daughter's car?" he asked, his voice low but carrying across the yard with unmistakable authority. Judith laughed, actually laughed. "Oh, Harold. Always so dramatic. We're not keeping her prisoner. We're helping her." "Helping her by taking her transportation?" Dad's tone remained calm, but I could hear the steel underneath. "She wasn't being responsible with it," Judith said, descending the porch steps like she was entering a courtroom she knew she'd win. "Maya's been very forgetful lately. Emotional. It happens after having a baby, the hormones, the stress. She left the car running in the driveway twice. She forgot where she parked at the grocery store. We're providing structure, because that's what she needs right now." I felt my face flush hot with shame and anger because those incidents, exaggerated and twisted as Judith described them, had happened, and she'd been collecting them like ammunition. "Maya?" Dad looked at me, giving me space to speak or stay silent, leaving the choice to me. But before I could answer, Adam appeared in the doorway, all smiles and concern, playing the role of the caring husband so perfectly it made my stomach turn. "Honey," he called out, jogging down the steps. "You should have told me you needed a ride. I was in a meeting, but I would have come to get you." He glanced at Dad with a sheepish expression. "Harold, I'm sorry she worried you. Mom was just holding on to the keys until Maya felt better. We've been concerned about her anxiety levels." I watched this performance from outside myself somehow, seeing Adam with new eyes. The tone shift, the way he angled his body between me and Dad, the subtle implication that I was the problem, the way he made everything sound reasonable and caring while making me feel crazy. "Give her the keys," Dad said simply. "Now." Adam's smile faltered for just a second before he recovered. Of course. I just think we should talk about this inside as a family. Maya, this is embarrassing for both of us. Why involve your father in our private matters?" There it was. The gentle scolding, the subtle shame, the implication that I'd betrayed him by seeking help. My voice came out smaller than I wanted. "Dad, maybe we should just go. I can get the keys later. This doesn't have to be." "You don't negotiate with people who steal from you," Dad interrupted, his eyes never leaving Adam. The word steal hung in the air like a grenade. Judith's face went red. "We didn't steal anything. She lives under our roof. She follows our rules. That's how families work, Harold. Maybe if you'd established better boundaries with her growing up, she'd understand that." Dad turned to Judith slowly, and I saw her take an involuntary step backward. "Your roof," he repeated quietly. "My daughter pays half the mortgage on this house." The silence that followed was deafening. I saw Adam's face go pale. Judith's mouth opened and closed like a fish. We. Judith stammered, trying to recover. "We manage the finances because you've been treating her like a tenant in her own home," Dad finished. "Like someone you're doing a favor for instead of an equal partner." And that's when I felt it. The first real spark of anger, cutting through months of confusion and self-doubt. They considered me a guest, a dependent, a controllable piece of furniture they could move around at will. I wasn't Maya Bennett who'd graduated with honors. I wasn't Maya who'd worked in marketing and had dreams of finishing her MBA. I wasn't even Maya the mother. I was just a problem to be managed, a variable to be controlled. "Get the keys," I said quietly, my voice stronger than before. "Now." Adam stared at me like I'd slapped him. For a moment, nobody moved. Then he pulled the car keys from his pocket and tossed them onto the porch table with a clatter that sounded like an insult. "There," he said, his voice suddenly cold, stripped of the gentle husband act. "Happy." It wasn't a gesture of respect. It was a display of power. "Look how easily I can give or take what's yours." Dad stood completely still, watching Adam the way I'd seen him study unstable structures in old buildings. He was looking for cracks, for weaknesses, for signs of imminent collapse. And from the tight set of his jaw, I could tell he was finding them. Judith recovered quickly, shifting tactics with practiced ease. "Fine. If she wants the car, she can have it. But that means she's also taking full responsibility. No more of us helping with the baby when she needs a break. No more meals prepared. No more covering when she can't handle things." The threat was clear: accept our help, accept our control, or lose everything. Something inside me snapped. You don't help, I heard myself say, my voice shaking but clear. You monitor. You criticize. You make me feel like I'm failing at everything. Judith's eyes widened with offense. Is that what you think? After everything we've done for you? After I rearranged my entire life to be here when you had Eli? You rearranged my life, I shot back. You moved into our house and took over. You decided what I should eat, when I should sleep, how I should parent my own child. You made me feel like a guest in my own home, and Adam. I turned to my husband, tears streaming now. You let her. Adam's face reddened. That's not fair, Maya. Mom was trying to help because you were struggling. You were anxious all the time, crying for no reason. Do they check your phone? Dad's question cut through Adam's defense like a knife. I froze. Adam's eyes went wide. Of course not. That's ridiculous. Only when she acts suspicious, Judith interjected, and the room went silent. Adam's head snapped toward his mother, his expression panicked. Judith seemed to realize what she'd admitted, her face going pale. Dad's voice, when it came, was like thunder. You don't get to police her life. The boom shook the walls, echoing off the high ceilings Judith was so proud of. She's not your prisoner. She's not your project. She's a grown woman with rights, and you've been systematically stripping them away. I'd never heard my father yell like that. In 30 years of knowing him, through house fires and family emergencies and my mother's death, I'd never heard that level of rage in his voice. Adam seemed to shrink, his earlier bravado evaporating. I'm just trying to make our family work, he said weakly. I'm trying to keep everything together. Maya's been so emotional since Eli, and Mom knows how to handle. By isolating her? Dad stepped forward, and Adam actually backed up. By taking her car? By monitoring her phone? By making her afraid to see her own father? That's not handling anything. That's abuse. The word hung in the air. Abuse. I never let myself think it before. Never let myself name what was happening. But hearing it spoken aloud, I felt something crack open inside my chest. From upstairs, Eli started crying. The tension in the room had woken him, or maybe he'd been awake all along, sensing the conflict the way he always did. I turned immediately toward the stairs, maternal instinct overriding everything else. But as I moved, Dad placed a gentle hand on my shoulder, stopping me for just a moment. Pack your things, he said quietly, just for me. Both of you are coming with me. She's not taking the baby anywhere. Judith shrieked, her composure finally shattering completely. You can't just. The baby is her child, Dad said, his voice returning to that dangerous calm. Not yours. And unless you want me to call the police and explain how you've been holding my daughter's car keys and monitoring her phone without her consent, I suggest you step aside. I looked at Adam, some part of me still hoping he'd stand up for me, defend me, prove that somewhere under all this control was the man I'd married. But he just stood there, looking between his mother and my father like a child waiting for adults to tell him what to do. That's when I knew. There was nothing left to save here. I went upstairs to pack, my legs shaking, my hands trembling, but my mind clearer than it had been in months. This house that I'd tried so hard to make a home. Choosing paint colors Judith immediately changed, arranging furniture she rearranged the next day, hanging photos she took down. This was never my home. It was a prison I'd decorated myself. Upstairs, I moved through the bedroom mechanically, pulling things from drawers with shaking hands. Diapers, grabbed the whole pack. Baby bottles, all of them. Eli's favorite stuffed elephant, the one my mother had given me when I told her I was pregnant, just weeks before she died. Clothes for both of us, though I couldn't think clearly about what we'd need. Documents, birth certificates, social security cards, my passport. Everything important. The photo of my mother and me at my college graduation, her smile so proud, so full of hope for my future. I grabbed it, frame and all, pressing it to my chest for a moment. Would she be disappointed in how I'd let things get this bad? Or would she understand? I heard voices downstairs, muffled arguing, but I forced myself to keep moving. Pack. Just pack. Don't think about what comes next. As I zipped up the diaper bag, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Heavy, familiar.
Adam.
He appeared in the bedroom doorway, blocking my path, his arms spread wide like he could physically prevent me from leaving. Maya, don't do this. His voice had shifted again, softer now, pleading. Don't leave with him. You know your dad never liked me. He's always been against us. He's putting these ideas in your head. I held Eli closer. My son had stopped crying when I picked him up, but now he clung to me tightly, his little fingers gripping my shirt. Adam, move. Just listen to me for 1 second. He took a step into the room, and I instinctively took a step back. You're overreacting. I know things have been tense. I know Mom can be a lot sometimes, but that's just because she cares. We both care so much about you and Eli.
Let's talk about this.
I'll set boundaries with Mom. I promise. Real ones this time. There it was. The loop I'd been trapped in for months. Control, then guilt, then affection, then promises, then back to control. Round and round until I couldn't tell which way was up anymore. I believed every promise, I whispered, my voice cracking. Nothing changed. It only got worse. That's not true. You took my car keys, Adam. You let your mother monitor my phone. You made me feel crazy for wanting to see my own father. I was protecting you.
You've been so unstable since Eli was born.
The doctor said postpartum anxiety. The doctor said I might have anxiety. You and your mother decided I was incapable of handling my own life. Adam's face hardened slightly, the mask slipping. He reached out toward Eli. Let me hold him. We'll calm down and talk about this rationally. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't violent. But something in the gesture, the assumption that he could just take my son from my arms, the entitlement, made something fierce ignite inside me. I stepped back sharply. Don't touch him. Adam's eyes widened, and for a moment I saw genuine shock. I'd never spoken to him like that. I'd never set a boundary that firm. Before he could respond, my father appeared at the top of the stairs, moving with that same measured calm that somehow felt more dangerous than any show of aggression. She said no, Dad stated simply. For the first time, I saw something shift in Adam's expression. Real fear. He was looking at my father not as Maya's dad, not as the retired firefighter who came to birthday parties, but as a man who could and would end this situation decisively. Adam backed out of the doorway. From downstairs, Judith's voice shrieked, I'm calling the police. She's kidnapping the baby. Harold, you're enabling her mental breakdown. Dad actually laughed, a bitter sound. You think the police will take your word over a mother's? A mother leaving a house where her car was taken, her phone was monitored, and she was being controlled?
Please.
Make that call. I gathered the packed bags, securing Eli against my hip with one arm. My ankle still throbbed, but adrenaline made it bearable. Dad took the heavier bags from me without a word. We descended the stairs together. Judith stood at the bottom, her phone in her hand, her face twisted with rage. You're making a huge mistake, she hissed at me. You'll regret this. You'll come crawling back, and when you do, move, Dad said quietly. Something in his tone, or maybe the look in his eyes, made Judith step aside.
Just like that.
The woman who'd controlled every aspect of my life for the past year moved out of our way. I walked past her, past Adam hovering uselessly in the hallway, past the kitchen where I'd been criticized for every meal I'd attempted to cook, past the living room where I'd been told my parenting was too soft, too anxious, too everything.
At the door, I paused.
Not from doubt, but from the strange need to mark the moment. I looked around one last time at the house that had slowly suffocated me, the beautiful prison I'd tried so hard to love. Then I walked out. Dad followed. The door closed behind us. Adam didn't follow us outside. Judith didn't chase us to the truck. They stayed inside, and I realized with cold clarity that they'd already moved to their next strategy. This wasn't over. Dad secured Eli in the car seat while I climbed into the passenger seat, my whole body shaking now that we were actually leaving. As we pulled out of the driveway, I couldn't help but look back at the house in the side mirror, watching it get smaller and smaller. "Dad," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "What if he comes for Eli? What if he tries to take him from me? He could say I'm unfit, unstable. They've been building that narrative for months." Dad reached over and squeezed my hand briefly before returning it to the wheel. "Then he'll meet a man who doesn't back down," he said firmly. "And we'll show every judge, every lawyer, every person who needs to see it exactly what they did to you. You're not alone in this, Maya. Not anymore." I pressed my face to the window, watching the familiar streets pass by, heading toward my father's house. Toward safety. Toward air I could breathe. For the first time in over a year, I wasn't asking permission to leave a room. I wasn't checking my phone anxiously to see if I'd missed a call. I wasn't calculating whether my words would set off an argument. I was just a mother, holding her son, driving away from the people who'd tried to convince her she was nothing. And somewhere under the fear and exhaustion and shock, I felt the tiniest spark of something I'd almost forgotten existed. Hope. Dad's truck pulled into his driveway just as the sun began setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed almost too peaceful for how I felt inside. The house looked exactly as I remembered from my childhood, modest, warm, with Dad's old firefighter helmet still hanging by the front door and Mom's wind chimes still singing from the porch. I hadn't been here in 2 months. 2 months of excuses and canceled plans and Adam's careful suggestions that maybe we should host Dad at our place instead, where it was easier with the baby. As I stepped out of the truck, something loosened in my chest. I could breathe. Actually breathe. No one was going to appear in the doorway with criticism about how I was holding Eli, how I looked, whether I'd remembered to do something I'd never been asked to do in the first place. Dad unlocked the door and stepped aside, letting me enter first. The familiar smell hit me immediately. Coffee, old books, the faint scent of wood smoke from the fireplace. Home. This was home. I set Eli down carefully on the living room carpet, and he immediately began crawling around, exploring with excitement I hadn't seen in weeks. He touched Dad's old boots by the door, babbled happily at the photos on the wall, pulled himself up on the coffee table to examine a collection of Firefighter Challenge coins. "He's happy," I whispered, watching my son giggle as he discovered Dad's collection of antique fire trucks on a low shelf. "Kids know when they're safe," Dad said quietly, setting down our bags. "Animals know it too. It's instinct." The words hit me harder than they should have. Eli knew. My baby had sensed the tension in that house, absorbed the criticism and control, felt his mother's constant anxiety. And now, in just minutes at his grandfather's house, he was a different child. What had I done to him? What had I let happen? Dad must have seen my face crumple because he was beside me immediately, his hand on my shoulder. "Don't go there, sweetheart. You got him out. That's what matters." He guided me to the kitchen table and sat me down. "First things first. Your phone stays off. They can track you through it, and I'm not taking chances. Second, you're not going back there alone. Ever. We clear on that?" I nodded, feeling like a child again, but in a good way. Someone was protecting me. Someone was making decisions designed to keep me safe, not to control me. "I'll make us some dinner," Dad said. "You just sit with Eli. Rest." Rest. When was the last time someone had told me to rest without it being a criticism of my inability to handle things? That night, after Dad prepared grilled cheese and tomato soup, Mom's comfort meal, the one she'd made whenever I was sick or sad, I tucked Eli into the guest room bed, surrounded by pillows to keep him safe. Dad had found an old baby monitor in the basement, still in its box from when I was born. "Never got rid of anything of yours," he admitted. "Your mother wouldn't let me. Said you might need it someday." The thought of Mom made my eyes sting. She died 3 years ago, cancer that moved too fast for any of us to accept. If she'd been here, would she have seen what was happening? Would she have stopped me from marrying Adam in the first place? I crawled into the other guest bed, exhausted beyond measure, and for the first time in months, I felt safe enough to close my eyes without anxiety about what would happen while I slept. But safety didn't stop the nightmares. I woke up gasping, my heart racing, Convinced, I'd heard Judith's footsteps in the hallway. The dream had been so vivid, her standing over Eli's crib, taking him, telling me I'd lost my chance, that I'd proven I was unfit. A gentle knock on the door.
Maya?
You okay in there? Dad's voice.
Real.
Present. Safe. Just a nightmare. I called back, my voice shaking. The door opened slightly, and Dad stood silhouetted in the hallway light. You're safe, honey. It's just me. Want some water? I nodded, and he disappeared, returning moments later with a glass and sitting on the edge of the bed like he used to when I was little and afraid of thunderstorms. I keep thinking they're going to show up and take him, I whispered. That I'm going to wake up and Eli will be gone, and they'll have convinced everyone I'm crazy. That's not going to happen. Dad's voice was firm. I promise you, Maya, that's not going to happen. But as I cried into his shoulder, quietly so Eli wouldn't wake, I wasn't sure I believed him. The next morning, despite turning off my phone, Adam found a way through. Dad's phone rang at 7 a.m., and it didn't stop. Call after call after call, each one from Adam's number. Dad finally answered on the 10th call, putting it on speaker, so I could hear. Where is she? Adam's voice was tight, controlled, dangerous in its calmness. Where's my wife, Harold? Your wife is exactly where she chose to be, Dad replied evenly. Let me talk to her.
Now.
She doesn't want to talk to you. You're poisoning her mind. You've always hated me. Always thought you knew better than everyone. Dad hung up, blocked the number. His landline rang 5 minutes later. This time, it was Judith's voice on the answering machine, and Dad let it play so I could hear. Harold, listen very carefully. Maya is confused. She's not thinking clearly. Postpartum depression can make women do irrational things, and we've all been very worried about her. Bring her back, and we'll forgive her for this episode. We'll get her the help she needs. But if you continue enabling this behavior, there will be consequences. Legal consequences. We have documented evidence of her instability, her inability to properly care for Eli. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. The word forgive made my blood run cold. Forgive me. For what? For wanting my car keys? For not wanting to be monitored? For leaving a situation where I was treated like a prisoner? Dad played the message twice, then saved it before deleting it from the machine. We're keeping all of this, he said. Everything they say, everything they do. Evidence. That afternoon, while Eli napped, I told Dad everything. Not the sanitized version, not the version where I minimized or made excuses. The real version. How Judith criticized every meal I cooked, telling me I was raising Eli to be a picky eater. How she inspected my grocery receipts and told me I was wasteful. How she went through my closet and removed clothes she deemed inappropriate for a mother. How she told me I was gaining too much weight, then in the same breath said I was too thin and clearly not eating enough. How Adam always took her side. How he'd say, Mom's just trying to help, or you're being too sensitive, or why do you always have to make things difficult? How they'd slowly cut me off from friends, telling me I was too tired for social obligations, that Eli needed consistency and routine. How visits with Dad kept getting postponed because something always came up. Adam had a work thing, Judith wasn't feeling well, the weather was bad, Eli was fussy. How they'd made me doubt my own memory, my own perception, my own sanity. They told me I'd left the car running twice. I said, my voice breaking. But Dad, I don't remember doing that. I remember turning it off. But they insisted, and they seemed so concerned, and I thought maybe I was losing my mind. Dad's fists clenched so tightly his knuckles went white. He stood up and paced to the window, his back rigid with suppressed rage. They were isolating you, he said, his voice rough. Classic abuse pattern. Make you doubt yourself. Cut you off from support. Make you dependent. Then control every aspect of your life. He turned to face me, and I saw tears in his eyes for the first time since Mom's funeral. That's abuse, Maya. What they did to you, that's abuse. You weren't imagining things. You weren't overreacting. You were being systematically broken down. Hearing him say it, again, clearly, with no room for doubt, something inside me shifted. The guilt I'd been carrying, the shame, the constant questioning of whether I was the problem. It started to lift. What do I do now? I whispered. Dad wiped his eyes roughly and sat back down. Tomorrow, we talk to a lawyer. Tonight, you rest. And you stop wondering if you made the right choice. You saved yourself and your son. That's what you did. That night, I held Eli while he slept, watching his chest rise and fall, his little face peaceful in a way I hadn't seen in months. Dad was right. I'd gotten him out. Whatever came next, we'd face it together. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Adam and Judith weren't done with me yet. Dad's longtime friend Lucinda Vargas had an office in a renovated historical building downtown, all exposed brick and tall windows that let in streams of morning light. She was in her 50s, sharp-eyed, with silver-streaked hair pulled into a neat bun and the kind of calm, focused presence that made me feel immediately safer. "Harold called me last night," she said, gesturing for us to sit. Dad had arranged for his neighbor Mrs. Patterson to watch Eli, saying this conversation needed my full attention. "He gave me the basics, but I need to hear it from you. Start from the beginning."
So I told her everything.
Again. But this time it was different. Lucinda took notes, asked specific questions, nodded at certain details in a way that made me realize she'd heard stories like mine before. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me directly. "Maya, what you're describing is coercive control. It's a pattern of behavior designed to isolate you, make you dependent, and strip away your autonomy. Taking your car, monitoring your phone, controlling your finances, limiting contact with your father, these aren't isolated incidents. This is systematic abuse." The word abuse still made me flinch, but hearing it from a lawyer, from someone who dealt with these cases professionally, made it feel more real, more valid. "What can we do?" Dad asked. "First, we document everything. Every call, every text, every interaction. Second, we file for a protective order if they continue harassing Maya. Third, we prepare for a custody battle, because based on what you've told me, they will try to use claims of instability against you." My stomach dropped. They said that. Judith said they have documentation of my instability. Lucinda's expression hardened. "Then we get ahead of it. We get your medical records showing no diagnosis of postpartum depression or psychosis. We get statements from your doctor. We show that their concerns were fabricated to justify control. And we prepare for them to get nasty, because people who lose control don't go down quietly." We left her office with a plan and a growing sense that this was going to get much worse before it got better. We returned to Dad's house to find Adam's car sitting in the driveway. My heart stopped. Dad immediately put his arm out, blocking me. "Stay behind me." Adam was pacing on the front lawn, and when he saw us, he rushed forward. His face was red, his eyes wild with something between panic and rage. "Maya, what are you doing? You can't just take Eli and disappear." Dad stepped between us. "She didn't disappear. She left a situation where she was being controlled." "Controlled?" Adam laughed, but it was a harsh, desperate sound. "Is that what she told you? That we controlled her? We took care of her. We supported her when she could barely function. By taking her car?" Dad's voice was dangerously quiet. "She wasn't safe driving. She was distracted, anxious. Let me talk to her." Adam tried to step around Dad, but Dad moved with him, maintaining the barrier between us. "Maya, please."
Just talk to me.
Just for 5 minutes, without him interfering. "She doesn't want to talk to you," Dad said firmly. That's when Judith's car pulled up, and I realized this had been coordinated. She stepped out, perfectly composed, and walked toward us with the air of someone arriving to clean up a mess. "Harold, when my daughter-in-law died, I stepped in to help," Judith said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I raised Adam and his sister through tragedy, and when Maya needed support, we opened our home and our hearts. This is how she repays us? By stealing away in the night with our grandson." "Your grandson?" The words burst out of me before I could stop them. "Eli is my son."
Mean it.
Judith's eyes snapped to me with cold fury. "And where were you planning to raise him? In your father's house? Without a job? Without stability?" We've given you everything: a roof, food, childcare. And if you leave, you'll lose Eli too. The threat was out in the open now, no longer veiled. Is that a threat? Dad asked, his voice carrying across the yard. Adam jumped in, trying damage control. Mom, stop. Maya, she doesn't mean. But Judith wasn't done. We have documentation. Texts where she admits she can't handle being a mother. Photos of her leaving Eli unattended. Medical concerns we've raised with her doctor. Lies, I said, my voice shaking but clear. All of it. You manufactured evidence to control me. Prove it, Judith shot back and smiled. Dad pulled out his phone. Get inside, Maya. Dad. Inside. Now. I hesitated, torn between fear and fury, but Dad's expression was so focused, so controlled, that I obeyed. I went inside, locked the door, and watched through the window as Dad made a phone call. 10 minutes later, a police car pulled up. Through the window, I watched Dad speak calmly to the officer, pointing at Adam and Judith, then at the house. The officer nodded, took notes, spoke briefly to Adam and Judith. I couldn't hear what was being said, but I saw Adam's face go pale and Judith's expression shift from confident to concerned. Finally, the officer got back in his car. Adam and Judith got in their vehicles and left. Dad came inside, his face grim. What did you tell them? I asked. The truth. That you left a controlling situation, that they showed up at my house uninvited and made threatening statements about taking your child. The officer documented it all. He handed me a card. He said if they show up again, call immediately. He also suggested we file a police report for harassment and document the coercive control. That afternoon, we drove to the police station. The officer who took my statement was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes who listened without judgment as I explained everything: the car keys, the phone monitoring, the isolation, the threats. This is more common than you think, she said gently. You did the right thing getting out. Keep documenting everything. Save every message, every voicemail, every interaction. As we left the station, my phone, which I'd turned back on to show the officer the tracking app Adam had installed, buzzed with a text from an unknown number. If you don't come back this week, things will get messy. Think about Eli. I showed it to Dad, my hand shaking. He pulled out his own phone and replied from his number. She's not alone anymore. Then he took my phone and powered it off. Tomorrow, we get you a new number. Tonight, we make sure every door and window in this house is locked. That night, I barely slept, jumping at every sound, convinced that Adam would show up and somehow take Eli while I wasn't looking. The rational part of my brain knew Dad was here, knew we'd called the police, knew I had legal protection starting to form around me. But the traumatized part, the part that had spent a year being told I was incompetent, unstable, unfit, that part kept whispering that they were right, that I couldn't protect my son, that I was going to lose him. I got up 3 times to check on Eli just to make sure he was still breathing, still safe, still mine. Dad's office was a mess of papers by the 3rd day. He'd always been methodical. 30 years as a firefighter had taught him to document everything, and now he applied that same systematic approach to building our case. Found something, he called from his desk, and I rushed over with my coffee. He'd been going through old emails, old financial documents, things Adam had asked him to co-sign years ago when they'd first bought the house. Dad had kept everything organized in labeled folders, dated and annotated. Look at this. He pointed to an email chain from 2 years ago. When you and Adam were buying the house, Adam told me you'd both discussed putting it in his and Judith's names for tax purposes. He asked me not to mention it to you because you were stressed about the move. I stared at the emails, my heart sinking. I never knew about that. He told me both our names were on the deed. They're not. Dad pulled up another document. The house is in Adam's name only. You've been paying half the mortgage on a house you don't legally own. The room spun slightly. Every check I'd written, every deposit I'd made, every dollar from my savings that had gone into our home, I own none of it. They planned this, I whispered. From the beginning. Keep looking, Dad said grimly. There's more. While Dad continued his document deep dive, I started rebuilding my own confidence. I cooked breakfast for Eli without someone criticizing the nutritional value. I played with him without someone commenting on his developmental milestones or lack thereof. I dressed him in clothes I chose, not clothes Judith approved. I laughed. Actually laughed. At Eli's silly faces, at a funny commercial on TV, at Dad's terrible attempt at making pancakes that came out shaped like abstract art. "You sound different," Dad observed one afternoon while we watched Eli stack blocks. "Different how?" "Like you're here. Really here. Not just going through motions." He was right. The constant fog of anxiety, the perpetual sense that I was about to mess something up, the exhausting mental gymnastics of trying to anticipate what would set off an argument. All of it was lifting, piece by piece. I started journaling everything, as Lucinda had suggested. Not just the abuse, but the healing. The small victories. Eli sleeping better. My appetite returning. The nightmares becoming less frequent. Then Lucinda called with news that made my blood run cold. "Maya, I need you to listen carefully," she said over speakerphone while Dad and I sat at his kitchen table. "I've been doing some digging into your finances, and I found something concerning." She explained that Adam had been accessing my personal savings account, the one I'd opened before we got married, the one that was supposed to be mine alone, and transferring money to pay off a private loan. "How much?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. $28,000 over the past 18 months. I couldn't breathe. $28,000. My emergency fund. My security. The money I'd saved for my job before Eli was born. The money I'd planned to use for going back to school. "The loan was taken out by Judith Bennett," Lucinda continued, "for her personal expenses. Adam's been using your money to pay his mother's debt." "Can we get it back?" Dad asked, his voice tight with controlled fury. "We can try. It'll be part of the divorce proceedings. But Maya, there's more." Lucinda paused. I found message exchanges between Adam and Judith. They were part of discovery documents Adam's lawyer provided. They don't realize what they reveal. She read some of them aloud, and each one felt like a punch to the gut. "Mom, Maya's getting restless. We need to keep her busy with the baby. Let's limit her contact with Harold. He makes her question things. I agree, we should take the car for a while. Make her more dependent on us." She started talking about going back to work. "We can't let that happen. She needs to focus on being a mother." They discussed me like I was a problem to be solved, a variable to be controlled, a project to be managed. Every restriction, every criticism, every moment I'd felt crazy for questioning them, it had all been calculated. "They planned everything," I said, my voice hollow. "Every single thing." Dad's face had gone dangerously calm, the way it did when he was at his angriest. "Lucinda, what's our next step?" "We present all of this to the court. Financial manipulation, documented evidence of coercive control, and these messages showing premeditation. Maya, this strengthens your case considerably." After hanging up, I sat on the porch while Eli napped, staring at the street where I used to ride my bike as a kid. I thought about the woman I'd been before Adam. Confident, ambitious, happy. I thought about the woman I'd become in that house. Small, anxious, constantly apologizing for existing. And I thought about the woman I was becoming now, stronger, clearer, fighting back. Dad came out and sat beside me. "You okay?" "I stayed because I thought it was my fault," I said quietly. "I thought if I could just be better, do better, be the perfect wife and mother they wanted me to be, then everything would be okay." "It was never about you being good enough," Dad said. "It was about them needing control. And people like that, they'll never have enough. You could have been perfect, and they would have found something else to criticize, some other way to maintain power." I know that now. I looked at him. But for a while there, I forgot who I was. "You remembered," Dad said simply. "That's what matters." That night, Adam showed up across the street, parked where the streetlight didn't quite reach, just sitting in his car and watching the house. Dad called the police immediately. By the time they arrived, Adam was gone, but the officer took a report and noted it as potential stalking behavior. "He's escalating," Lucinda warned when Dad called to update her. People who lose control often do. Maya needs to be prepared for him to get worse before this is over. Dad installed cameras on the porch and motion sensor lights in the yard. He had a security system activated that night. Mrs. Patterson from next door promised to keep an eye out during the day. "We're not taking chances," Dad said firmly. I held Eli that night, singing him the lullaby my mother used to sing to me, and felt something solidify inside my chest. Resolve. Determination. The absolute certainty that whatever happened next, I would protect my son. They tried to break me. They tried to make me doubt myself, to make me weak and dependent and controllable. But I wasn't broken. I was angry, and I was ready to fight. The courthouse felt massive and intimidating, all marble floors and echoing hallways and people in suits hurrying past with serious expressions. I wore the one professional dress I'd managed to pack, my hands shaking slightly as I held the folder of documents Lucinda had prepared. Dad walked beside me, solid and steady, with Eli secured in a carrier on his chest. Lucinda led the way, her heels clicking confidently on the polished floor. Across the hallway, I saw them. Adam in a suit I'd never seen before, probably bought just for this. Judith beside him, dressed like she was attending a business meeting, her face composed and confident. They looked at me, and I saw calculation in Judith's eyes, dismissal in Adam's expression. They thought they'd already won. The courtroom itself was smaller than I'd imagined, but no less intimidating. We sat on one side, they sat on the other, and the judge, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and an expression that suggested she'd heard every excuse and lie possible, reviewed the documents before her. The hearing began. Adam's lawyer spoke first, painting a picture of a concerned husband and grandmother trying to help an unstable new mother. They presented their evidence, screenshots of texts where I'd admitted being tired, photos where Eli was crying, a letter from Judith detailing her concerns about my mental health. It was all so carefully constructed, so believable if you didn't know the context. I felt my confidence wavering until Lucinda leaned over and whispered, "Let them finish. We're next." Then Judith made her first mistake. She couldn't help herself. When the judge asked a clarifying question about why they'd taken my car keys, Judith interrupted. "Your Honor, if I may, Maya wasn't being responsible. She left the car running multiple times. She couldn't remember where she parked. She was clearly not capable of." "Mrs. Bennet," the judge said sharply, "you'll have a chance to speak when called upon. One more interruption, and you'll be asked to leave." Judith's face flushed, but she sat back, jaw tight with suppressed fury. When it was our turn, Lucinda was methodical and devastating. She presented the tracking app on my phone. The financial records showing unauthorized withdrawals. The messages between Adam and Judith discussing strategies to keep me dependent. The police reports documenting their harassment. The documentation from the car showing it was registered in Judith's name, not mine, despite being a gift. Most damning of all, she presented my medical records, which showed no diagnosis of postpartum depression or psychosis, contradicting their claims about my mental instability. The defense has painted Mrs. Bennet as a concerned family helping an unwell mother, Lucinda said clearly. What the evidence shows is a coordinated effort to isolate, control, and financially exploit my client. This is textbook coercive control. Adam tried to maintain his sad husband act, explaining how he was just trying to protect me, to keep our family together. But when the judge asked him directly about the unauthorized access to my savings account, he stumbled. We had an understanding. The money was for family expenses." "Did Mrs. Bennet authorize these withdrawals?" "Well, not explicitly, but we discussed." "Yes or no, Mr. Bennet?"
No.
The judge made a note, her expression unreadable. Then I spoke. Lucinda had coached me to stay calm, stick to facts, not let emotion overwhelm the narrative. But when the judge asked me to describe my experience, something inside me broke open. "Your Honor, I wasn't allowed to see my father," I said, my voice shaking but clear. "When I wanted to visit him, there was always a reason I couldn't. Adam had a work thing. Judith wasn't feeling well. The baby needed routine. Every time I tried to maintain contact with my own father, I was told I was being selfish, that I wasn't prioritizing my family. I took a breath, looking directly at the judge. They towed my car and told me I was irresponsible. They monitored my phone and said it was for my own good. They accessed my savings and said it was for family expenses. They made me doubt my own memory, my own judgment, my own sanity. And when I finally left, when I finally chose to protect myself and my son, they threatened to take him from me. They said I was unfit, unstable, that I'd regret leaving. My voice cracked, but I pushed through. I wasn't perfect. I was tired. I was anxious. But I wasn't unstable. I was being systematically broken down by people who claimed to love me. And all I want now is the chance to raise my son in peace, without fear, without control, without someone telling me I'm failing at being a mother every single day. The courtroom was silent when I finished. Even Judith, for once, had nothing to say. The judge reviewed her notes for what felt like an eternity. Finally, she looked up. Based on the evidence presented, the financial manipulation, the documented coercive control, the harassment following Mrs. Bennett's departure, and the lack of any credible evidence of mental instability, I'm ruling as follows. She adjusted her glasses. Maya Bennett retains full physical and legal custody of Eli Bennett pending further evaluation. A protective order is granted, prohibiting Adam Bennett and Judith Bennett from contacting Mrs. Bennett directly or through third parties, from coming within 500 feet of her residence, and from any communication regarding the child except through attorneys or court-supervised visitation. Your Honor. Adam started to stand, but his lawyer pulled him down. Furthermore, the judge continued, her tone brooking no argument. I'm ordering a full financial audit to determine the extent of unauthorized withdrawals from Mrs. Bennett's accounts, with restitution to be determined. Mr. Bennett, you should consider yourself fortunate that I'm not referring this matter for criminal prosecution at this time. Judith actually stood up. This is absurd. We were helping her. Harold Bennett has been manipulating. Mrs. Bennett, sit down immediately or be removed, the judge said coldly. I've reviewed the evidence. The only manipulation I see documented here is your own. The gavel came down with a sharp crack that seemed to echo through my entire body. Court adjourned. I collapsed into Lucinda's arms, sobbing out months, maybe years, of fear and guilt and shame. Dad wrapped both of us in a hug. Eli sandwiched safely between us, probably confused about why Mama was crying but Papa was smiling. You did it, sweetheart, Dad whispered into my hair. You're free. Outside the courthouse, Adam tried one last time. We were walking to the car when he called out across the parking lot, his voice desperate and raw. Maya, we can fix this. Don't throw away our marriage. Think about Eli. He needs his father. I stopped. Not because I was tempted, not because I doubted, but because I needed to mark this moment. I needed to say what I should have said months ago. I turned to face him, standing between my father and my lawyer, holding the protective order that would keep him away from me. No, Adam, I said, my voice steady and clear. Eli needs a mother who's safe, who's free, who can teach him that love doesn't look like control. You don't get to manipulate me anymore. You don't get to make me doubt myself. You don't get any part of me ever again. His face crumpled, but I felt nothing.
No guilt.
No doubt. Just clarity. I turned and walked to Dad's truck, and I didn't look back. 2 weeks later, Dad helped me move into my own apartment. It was small, a one-bedroom with space for Eli's crib, a tiny kitchen, a living room just big enough for a couch and some toys. But it was mine. Actually mine. My name on the lease, my choice of curtains, my decisions about everything from what to eat to when to sleep to who was allowed inside. I set up Eli's crib by the window, where morning light would wake him gently. I hung my mother's photo on the wall. Her smiling face, her eyes that looked so much like mine, her expression that seemed to say, I'm proud of you. Mom, I whispered, touching the frame, I'm safe now. We're safe. That first night alone in my own apartment, after Dad had left and Eli was asleep and the silence felt both terrifying and liberating, I sat on my second-hand couch and just breathed. No one was monitoring what I was doing. No one was going to criticize my choices. No one was going to tell me I was failing. I pulled out my phone, new number, no tracking apps, just mine, and texted my father. "Thank you for saving me." His response came immediately. "You saved yourself. I just reminded you who you were." I set the phone down and looked around my small apartment. The beginning of something new. The foundation of a life built on my own terms. For the first time in over a year, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't broken. I was free. And somewhere in the quiet of that small apartment, with my son sleeping peacefully in the next room and my future stretching out uncertain but mine, I felt something I'd almost forgotten existed. Hope. Real, solid, unshakable hope. This was only the beginning. There would be hard days ahead, legal battles to finish, healing to do, a life to rebuild from the ground up. But tonight, in this moment, I let myself feel the victory.
Ideas capaz.
I'd fought back. I'd won. And no one, not Adam, not Judith, not anyone, would ever control me again. When someone makes you feel like you're losing your mind for wanting basic respect and freedom, how do you know when it's time to walk away? If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in impossible situations.